The scorching summer sun beat down on the bustling streets of downtown Chicago as I hurried along the sidewalk, dodging distracted pedestrians glued to their smartphones. My name's Thomas Anderson, but everyone calls me Tom. I'm the son of a third-generation watchmaker, born into a family business that's been a staple of the Windy City for decades. Back in the day, Anderson & Son Timepieces was the go-to place for anyone looking for a quality watch or clock. We had a reputation for craftsmanship that was second to none. But times change, and in recent years, our little shop has been struggling to keep up with the influx of big chain stores and online retailers. It's been tough watching our once thriving business slowly wither away, teetering on the edge of becoming just another forgotten storefront in a sea of shiny new boutiques. As a kid, I used to love spending hours in the workshop, carefully taking apart and reassembling intricate timepieces, while my friends were out playing video games or sports. There was something magical about the precise dance of gears and springs, each component working in perfect harmony to keep time ticking steadily forward. I dreamed of following in my father's footsteps, becoming a master watchmaker and carrying on the family legacy. But as I grew older, that passion began to fade. Every day, I walk into our shop and see the empty chairs, hear the same eerie silence broken only by the soft ticking of unsold clocks. It was a constant reminder of how out of touch we've become. Watches? In an age of smartphones and smartwatches? Who needs them anymore? The thought of dedicating my life to such a seemingly obsolete craft started to feel suffocating. I began to see our quaint little shop as an anchor, dragging me down and holding me back from the exciting opportunities of the modern world. My enthusiasm for the trade dwindled, replaced by a gnawing sense of resentment and restlessness. So, there I was, half-heartedly going through the motions of another day of drumming up business. In reality, I'd spent just the last hour catching up with Mrs. Goldstein, a longtime customer who's been coming to our shop since before I was born. She didn't buy anything, of course, just wanted to chat about the good old days and show me pictures of her grandkids. Not exactly the kind of sale that was going to turn our fortunes around. After grabbing a quick lunch at my favorite deli, I found myself overcome by an overwhelming wave of drowsiness. The combination of a heavy pastrami sandwich and the oppressive summer heat was too much to resist. I stumbled back to my car, cranked up the AC, and promptly dozed off in the driver's seat. I'm not sure how long I was out, but I woke up with a start, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. As I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, I let out a jaw-cracking yawn. Man, what am I even doing? I muttered to myself, running a hand through my disheveled hair. It's not like anybody's clamoring to buy our watches these days. With a resigned sigh, I reached into my pocket to check time on my phone, only to find nothing but empty space where my wallet should have been. A jolt of panic shot through me as I patted down all my pockets, then frantically searched the car's interior. Nothing. Oh no, no, no! I groaned, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. Where the hell did I lose it? My mind raced, trying to retrace my steps. The deli? Mrs. Goldstein's place? Or had I dropped it somewhere on the street? The thought of my credit cards, driver's license, and the few $100s in cash I was carrying floating around the city made me feel sick to my stomach. Then, like a lifeline in a storm, a memory surfaced. There was a police station just a few blocks from where I parked. Maybe, just maybe, some good Samaritan had turned in my wallet. It was a long shot, but it was all I had. I gunned the engine and peeled out of my parking spot, probably breaking a few traffic laws in my haste to get to the station. As I burst through the doors, out of breath and wild-eyed, I nearly collided with a young woman who was just leaving. "Whoa there, buddy," she exclaimed, stumbling back a step. "What's the rush?" Sorry. I panted, barely sparing her a glance as I made a beeline for the front desk. "I think I lost my wallet and I was hoping..." "Excuse me?" The young woman's voice cut through my rambling. "But did you say you lost a wallet?" I turned to face her, really taking her in for the first time. She looked to be in her late teens, maybe early 20s, with long dark hair partially hidden under a faded Cubs cap. Her clothes were a bit worn, jeans with frayed hems and a hoodie that had definitely seen better days. But what struck me most were her eyes, warm, intelligent, and filled with a quiet determination. "Yeah, I did," I replied, a faint glimmer of hope rising in my chest. Why? Did you... She smiled and held up a familiar black leather billfold. Is this it? I let out a whoop of joy that echoed through the station, earning me curious looks from the officers milling about. Yes! Oh my god, yes, that's it! I reached for the wallet, then hesitated. Wait, how did you... The girl's smile widened. I found it on the sidewalk outside Maury's Deli about an hour ago. I was just dropping it off here when you came charging in like a man on a mission. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. You have no idea how much this means to me. I can't thank you enough, Miss... Carter, she supplied. Natalie Carter, but everyone calls me Natty. Well, Natty, I said, extending my hand. I'm Tom Anderson. You just saved me from a world of headaches and hassle. Please, let me repay you somehow. Can I treat you to dinner? Or maybe... Natty's eyes widened slightly, and she took a small step back. Oh, no, that's not necessary. I'm just glad I could help. Besides, she glanced at her watch. I've got to get to work. My shift starts in 20 minutes. I felt a pang of disappointment, but nodded in understanding. Of course. I didn't mean to keep you. But seriously, thank you. Not everyone would have gone out of their way to return a stranger's wallet. She shrugged, a hint of sadness flickering across her face. I know what it's like to struggle. The last thing anyone needs is to lose their money and ID on top of everything else. As Natty turned to leave, I found myself calling out. Wait! She paused, looking back at me quizzically. I own a watch shop downtown. Anderson & Son Timepieces. If you ever need anything fixed or cleaned, just stop by. On the house, of course. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. That's very kind of you, Mr. Anderson. I'll keep that in mind. Take care. And with that, she was gone, leaving me standing in the middle of the police station, clutching my recovered wallet, and feeling like I just let something important slip through my fingers. Chapter 2. A Chance Encounter. The next few weeks passed in a blur of routine and half-hearted attempts to drum up business. But I couldn't shake the memory of Natalie Carter and her act of kindness. In a world that often felt cold and indifferent, her simple gesture had rekindled a tiny spark of hope in me. It was Tuesday afternoon when fate decided to intervene once again. I stopped by the corner 7-Eleven to grab a coffee, and maybe some inspiration for how to save our failing business. As I rounded the chip aisle, I heard a commotion near the register.
You little thief,
a man's voice boomed.
I knew you were trouble the moment you started working here.
I peered around the corner to see a heavy-set man in his 50s, his face beet red with anger, looming over a smaller figure. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized the threadbare hoodie and faded Cubs cap. It was Natty. I swear, Mr. Johnson, I didn't take anything. Natty's voice was strained but steady. I would never steal from a store. Please, you have to believe me. The man, Mr. Johnson, I assumed, snorted derisively.
Oh yeah? And how do you explain the missing money from the register? You're the only one who's been working the counter today.
I couldn't stand by and watch this unfold. Without thinking, I stepped forward. Excuse me, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Is there a problem here? Mr. Johnson's glare swiveled to me.
This doesn't concern you, pal. Mind your own business.
But Natty's eyes had widened in recognition. Mr. Anderson? I nodded to her, then turned back to the angry manager. Look, I don't know what's going on here, but I do know this young woman. She found my wallet a few weeks ago and went out of her way to return it to the police station. Does that sound like the actions of a thief to you? Mr. Johnson's scowl deepened.
People can surprise you. Just because she did one good deed doesn't mean she's not capable of stealing.
I felt my own temper rising. And just because money's gone missing doesn't mean she took it. Have you considered that there might be another explanation?
Like what?
He sneered. I don't know, I admitted. But accusing and threatening your employees without proof isn't right. Maybe there was a mistake in counting the till. Or a customer could have shortchanged you earlier. The manager's face was still red, but some of the fight seemed to go out of him. He turned back to Natty.
Is that possible? Did you double-check the count from this morning?
Natty nodded eagerly. I always do, Mr. Johnson. but I'd be happy to go through everything again with you. Maybe we overlooked something. Mr. Johnson grunted, then jerked his thumb towards the back room.
Fine, let's take another look. But if I find out you're lying...
As they disappeared into the office, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The other customers in the store quickly lost interest and went back to their shopping, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. I had to know how this played out. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only about 15 minutes, Natty emerged from the back room. Her shoulders were slumped and she looked utterly exhausted. "Hey," I said softly, approaching her. "Are you okay? What happened?" She gave me a warm smile. "It turns out there was a mistake in the morning count. The money wasn't missing after all." Natty's voice dropped to a whisper. "Thank you for standing up for me. You didn't have to do that." I shrugged, feeling a bit embarrassed by her gratitude. It was nothing. I couldn't just stand by and watch you get accused like that, especially not after what you did for me. Natty's smile grew a little brighter. "Well, it meant a lot. More than you know." She glanced at the clock behind the counter and sighed. "My shift's over. I should probably get going before Mr. Johnson changes his mind and finds something else to yell at me about." "Do you need a ride anywhere?" I found myself asking. "My car's just outside." She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Actually, that would be great, if it's not too much trouble." "Not at all," I assured her. "It's the least I can do." As we walked to my car, I couldn't help but notice how small and vulnerable Natty looked. The confidence she'd shown at the police station seemed to have evaporated, leaving behind a young woman who looked like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Once we were settled in the car, I turned to her. "So, where to?" Natty gave me an address in a part of town I wasn't too familiar with. As I pulled out onto the street, an awkward silence settled over us. I searched for something to say that wouldn't sound patronizing or invasive. "That must have been pretty scary back there," I finally ventured. "Does that kind of thing happen often?" Natty let out a humorless laugh. "More often than I'd like. It seems like every time something goes wrong, I'm the first person people look at. I guess that's what happens when you're the poor kid from the wrong side of the tracks." My heart ached at the resignation in her voice. "It's not fair. You shouldn't be judged based on where you come from, or how much money your family has." She shrugged, staring out the window at the passing buildings. "Maybe not, but that's just how the world works, isn't it? People see my secondhand clothes and assume I'm trouble. It doesn't matter how hard I work or how honest I try to be." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling a surge of anger at the injustice of it all. "It does matter, Natty. There are people who see beyond that stuff. You just have to find them." She turned to look at me, a spark of curiosity in her eyes. "Is that how you see the world, Mr. Anderson? Always looking for the best in people?" I chuckled ruefully. "Call me Tom, please." And no, I can't say that I do. At least not lately. I've been pretty caught up in my own problems, to be honest. "Oh?" Natty raised an eyebrow. "What kind of problems, if you don't mind me asking?" I hesitated for a moment, then figured, why not? Sometimes it's easier to open up to a stranger than to the people closest to you. "Well, remember that watch shop I mentioned? It's been in my family for 3 generations, but these days we're barely scraping by. I've been trying to figure out how to save it, but..." I trailed off, shaking my head. Natty was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "It must be really tough, feeling like you're letting down your family's legacy." Her insight caught me off guard. "Yeah, exactly. How did you..." She gave me a side smile. "I know a thing or two about family pressure. My mom works 2 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. My little brother and sister look up to me, expecting me to somehow make things better. It's a lot sometimes." As we pulled up to a stoplight, I turned to really look at Natty. In that moment, I saw beyond the worn clothes and the weary expression. I saw a young woman who, despite the hardships life had thrown at her, still found the strength to be kind and to fight for a better future. And suddenly, I felt ashamed of my own self-pity and defeatist attitude. "Natty," I said slowly, "I think you might be one of the strongest people I've ever met." She blushed, ducking her head. "I'm really not. I'm just trying to survive like everyone else. No, I mean it, I insisted. You got all this weight on your shoulders, but you still go out of your way to help others. You returned my wallet when plenty of people would have just kept the cash. You work hard despite people constantly doubting you. That takes real strength. Natty was quiet for a long moment, and I worried I overstepped. But when she looked up, there were tears shimmering in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. I don't think anyone's ever seen me like that before. As we pulled up to her apartment building, a weathered brick structure that had seen better days, I felt an inexplicable urge to prolong our time together. Listen, I said, I know this might sound weird, but would you maybe want to grab a coffee sometime? I feel like I could learn a lot from you. Natty's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed suspiciously. Mr. Anderson? Tom? I appreciate the offer, but why? I mean, what could you possibly learn from someone like me? I leaned back in my seat, considering her question. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. But I do know that talking to you has made me see things differently. You've got a perspective on life that I never experienced. And maybe... I trailed off, searching for the right words. Maybe what? Nettie prompted, her voice soft but curious. I took a deep breath. Maybe you could help me remember why I fell in love with watchmaking in the first place. Why it matters. Because lately, I've been feeling like it's all pointless. Nettie was quiet for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. Then, to my surprise, she let out a small laugh. You know, it's funny. I've always loved watches. Really? I couldn't hide my astonishment. But you're so young. I thought kids these days were all about their smartphones. She rolled her eyes good-naturedly. Some of us appreciate the classics, you know? There's something, I don't know, equalizing about watches. Time moves the same for everyone, whether you're rich or poor. When I look at a watch, I see possibility. Each tick is a reminder that things can change, that the future isn't set in stone. Her words hit me like a physical force. How had I forgotten that feeling? The magic of time, the potential held in each passing second. I've been so caught up in the business side of things, in the struggle to stay relevant, that I lost sight of what made watches special in the first place. Natty, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I think you've just taught me something incredibly valuable. She blushed again, but this time there was a hint of pride in her smile. Well, I guess that's 1 point for the coffee meetup, huh? I grinned back at her. Definitely. So, what do you say? No pressure, of course. And I totally understand if you're not comfortable. Yes, she cut me off. I like that, but... She hesitated, biting her lip. But what? Could we maybe meet at your shop instead? Natty asked. I've always wanted to see inside a real watchmaker's workshop. I felt a surge of excitement at the idea. Absolutely! How about this Saturday? Say around 2 p.m.? The shop's usually pretty quiet then. Natty nodded, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. It's a date. I mean, not a date, just a... you know what I mean. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. I know exactly what you mean. See you Saturday, Natty. As she got out of the car and headed into her building, I found myself watching her go with a mixture of curiosity and something else I couldn't quite name. Whatever it was, I had a feeling that my life was about to change in ways I never could have anticipated. Chapter 3. A New Perspective. The next few days crawled by at an agonizingly slow pace. I found myself constantly glancing at the clock, counting down the hours until Saturday afternoon. It was ridiculous, really. I was a grown man, getting excited about showing a teenager around my dusty old shop. But I couldn't deny the spark of anticipation that flared every time I thought about Natty's visit. When Saturday finally arrived, I was at the shop hours early, frantically cleaning and organizing. I wanted everything to be perfect. As I polished the glass display cases and arranged our sadly depleted stock to its best advantage, I caught sight of my reflection in one of the mirrors. I barely recognized the man staring back at me. Eyes bright, hints of smile playing at the corners of my mouth. When was the last time I looked forward to coming to work? At precisely 1:58 p.m., a little bell above the door chimed. I looked up to see Natty cautiously poking her head in. "Hello? Tom? Are you here?" "Come on in," I called out, wiping my hands on a cloth as I emerged from behind the counter. "Right on time. I'm impressed." Natty stepped inside, her eyes wide as she took in her surroundings. "Wow," she breathed. "This place is amazing." I couldn't help but puff up a little with pride. Sure, Anderson & Son Timepieces wasn't the fanciest shop in town, but there was a certain charm to its old-world craftsmanship. The warm wood paneling, the gentle ticking of dozens of clocks, the glint of polished metal and glass. It all came together to create an atmosphere that was both comforting and slightly magical. "Thanks," I said, gesturing for her to come closer. "It's not much, but it's home. Would you like a tour?" Natty nodded eagerly, and I began showing her around the shop. I pointed out some of our more interesting pieces. The ornate grandfather clock that had been in the family for generations. Delicate pocket watches that were becoming increasingly rare. The sleek modern designs that we added in an attempt to stay current. As we moved through the shop, I found myself sharing stories about each piece. The watch my grandfather had made for my grandmother on their 50th anniversary. The clock that had survived a fire that nearly destroyed the building back in the 70s. The first watch I'd ever repaired on my own, at the tender age of 12. To my surprise and delight, Natty hung on every word. She asked insightful questions, marveled at the intricate mechanisms, and even recognized a few of the more famous watchmakers whose work we carried. "I can't believe you know so much about watches," I said as we made our way to the workshop in the back. "Where did you learn all this?" Natty shrugged, a hint of sadness creeping into her voice. "My dad, mostly. Before he left, he used to be really into vintage watches. Said they were a great investment. He spent hours teaching me about different models and makers." I winced internally, kicking myself for bringing up what was clearly a painful subject. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry." She waved off my concern. "It's okay. It was a long time ago. And hey, at least something good came out of it, right?" Natty's smile was small but genuine. "Now, are you going to show me where the magic happens or what?" Grateful for the change of subject, I led her into the workshop. This is my domain, the place where broken timepieces came back to life under my careful hands. Workbenches lined the walls, covered in specialized tools and magnifying glasses. A large, well-lit area in the center held my main workspace, currently occupied by a half-disassembled pocket watch. Natty's eyes lit up as she took it all in. "This is incredible," she breathed. "It's like a hospital for watches." I chuckled at the comparison. "I suppose it is, in a way. Want to see how it's done?" For the next hour, I showed Natty the basics of watch repair. I demonstrated how to open a case without damaging it, how to identify common problems, and how to clean and oil delicate components. To my amazement, she picked up on things incredibly quick. Her small, nimble fingers were perfect for manipulating the tiny parts, and she had an intuitive understanding of how the mechanisms worked. "You're natural," I said, watching as she successfully reassembled a simple movement. "Are you sure you haven't done this before?" Natty beamed with pride. "Nope, first time. But it just makes sense, you know? It's like a puzzle, but with a purpose. Every piece has its place, and when they all work together, you create something beautiful and useful." Her words struck a chord in me. Isn't that what I'd been missing? The sense of purpose, the satisfaction of creating something meaningful? I'd been so focused on the bottom line, and while trying to compete with mass-produced watches and smartphones, that I lost sight of what made our craft special. "Natty," I said slowly, an idea beginning to form in my head. "What would you think about learning more about watchmaking? Not just repairs, but design and creation too." She looked up at me, her eyes wide with surprise and a hint of hope. "Are you serious? You'd be willing to teach me?" I nodded, feeling a surge of excitement. "Absolutely. In fact, I have a proposition for you. How would you like a job?" Natty's jaw dropped. "A job? Here? But why? I mean, I don't know anything about running a store or..." I held up a hand to stop her. "Hear me out. You're clearly passionate about watches, and you have a natural talent for the technical side of things. But more than that, you have a perspective that I've been sorely lacking. You see the beauty and potential in these timepieces in a way that I had forgotten. I took a deep breath, fully committing to the idea as I spoke it aloud. I think you could help breathe new life into this place. We could start you off part-time, teaching you the ropes of both watchmaking and retail. And who knows, if things go well, maybe we could look at making it a full-time position down the line. Natty was quiet for a long moment, her brow forward in thought. That's incredibly generous of you, Tom. But are you sure? I mean, I'm just a kid from the wrong side of the tracks. What if your customers don't like seeing me here? I felt a flash of anger at the thought of anyone judging her based on her background. Then, they're not the kind of customers we want, I said firmly. Look, Natty, I'm not offering you this job out of pity or charity. I genuinely believe you could be an asset to this business. You have skills and the insights that I need. So, what do you say? Want to give it a shot? A slow smile spread across Natty's face, growing wider by the second. Yes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, then louder. Yes, I'd love to. We spent the next hour hammering out the details. Her schedule, her starting wage, what her responsibilities would be. As we talked, I could feel the energy in the shop shifting. The dusty displays and ticking clocks seemed to come alive with new possibility. When Natty finally left, promising to return on Monday to start her training, I found myself standing in the middle of the shop, surrounded by the gentle symphony of ticking timepieces. For the first time in years, the sound filled me not with dread or resignation, but with hope. I picked up a pocket watch from the nearest display, running my fingers over its smooth surface. Well, Dad, I murmured to the empty room. I think things are about to get interesting around here. Chapter 4. Winds of Change. The next few weeks flew by in a whirlwind of activity. True to her word, Natty showed up bright and early on Monday morning, eager to begin her training. I started her off with the basics: how to greet customers, operate the cash register, and perform simple cleaning and maintenance on the watches we sold. To my delight, Natty proved to be a quick study and an enthusiastic learner. She absorbed everything I taught her like a sponge, often staying late to practice her skills or pore over the watchmaking books I lent her. Her passion was infectious, reminding me of my own early days in the trade. But it wasn't just her technical aptitude that impressed me. Natty had a way with people that I never possessed. She could strike up a conversation with anyone who walked through our doors, putting them at ease with her warm smile and genuine interest in their stories. One afternoon, about a month into Natty's employment, I overheard her chatting with an elderly gentleman who come in here to have his watch repaired.
This was my father's watch,
the man was saying, his voice gruff with emotion.
He wore it every day of his life. I know it's not worth much, but...
It's priceless, Natty finished for him, her voice soft and understanding. Because it carries all those memories of your dad, right? Don't worry, sir. We'll take extra special care of it. I promise. As I watched from the workshop doorway, I saw the man's eyes mist over. He reached out and patted Natty's hand.
Thank you, young lady. You know, it does my heart good to see someone your age who understands the value of these old things.
After the man left, I approached Natty at the counter. That was really something, I said. You have a gift for connecting with people. Natty blushed, ducking her head. I just treat him the way I want someone to treat my mom or my siblings. These watches, they're not just objects to people. They're like little pieces of their hearts. I nodded, feeling a swell of pride. Exactly. That's what I've been forgetting all these years. We're not just selling timepieces, we're preserving memories and creating new ones. As the weeks turned into months, I began to notice a change in our little shop. Word started to spread about the friendly, knowledgeable young woman at Anderson & Son Timepieces. We began to see more foot traffic, including younger customers who might have previously dismissed us as old-fashioned. Natty's presence seemed to breathe new life into the store. She suggested rearranging our displays to highlight some of our more unique pieces, and she even started an Instagram account to showcase our work. To my amazement, we began receiving inquiries from people all over the country who had seen our post online. But it wasn't just the business that was changing. I found myself looking forward to each day in a way I hadn't in years. Natty's enthusiasm was contagious, and I rediscovered the joy of working with my hands, of bringing old timepieces back to life. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, as we were closing up shop, Natty turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Hey, Tom, can I ask you something?" "Of course," I replied, hanging up my work apron. "What's on your mind?" She hesitated for a moment, then plunged ahead. "Have you ever thought about making your own watches? I mean, not just repairing them, but designing and creating something totally unique." I blinked, taken aback by the question. Well, yes, I suppose I have. But it always seemed like a pipe dream. The market's so saturated, and the cost of producing a new line. Natty's eyes lit up with excitement. "But what if we didn't try to compete with big brands? What if we made something really special? One-of-a-kind pieces for people who want more than just a way to tell time?" I felt a stirring of interest, despite my ingrained caution. "What do you have in mind?" "Well," she said, warming to her theme, "I was thinking about all the customers we've had, and the stories they tell about their watches. What if we created custom pieces that incorporated elements of those stories? Like, say someone wanted a watch to commemorate their wedding. We could use materials or designs that reflect their relationship. Maybe even engrave important dates or coordinates inside the case." As Natty spoke, I found myself getting caught up in her vision. The idea of creating truly unique, meaningful timepieces was incredibly appealing. It will allow us to showcase our craftsmanship while tapping into the emotional connection people had with their watches. "That's actually a really interesting idea," I said slowly. "It would be a lot of work, and we need to source some new materials and tools. But if we could pull it off..." Natty grinned, her whole face lighting up. "It could be amazing, right? We could start small. Maybe do a few custom pieces for existing customers to gauge interest. And if it takes off, who knows? We could become known as a place to go for one-of-a-kind personalized watches." I couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. "You know what? Let's do it. We'll start working on some designs tomorrow. But for now," I glanced at the clock, "it's well past closing time. Should head home and get some rest." As Natty gathered her things and prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Tom," she said, her voice suddenly serious, "I just wanted to say thank you for taking a chance on me. This job, it's changed my life." I felt a lump form in my throat. "No, Natty, thank you. You reminded me why I fell in love with this business in the first place. We make a good team, you and I." She beamed at me one last time before disappearing into the raining evening. As I locked up the shop and headed home, my mind was buzzing with possibilities. Natty's idea of creating custom, story-driven watches had ignited a spark of creativity that I thought had long since burned out. That night, for the first time in years, I dreamed of gears and springs, of watch faces that told more than just time. The next months were a whirlwind of activity. Natty and I threw ourselves into the project with a passion that surprised even me. We spent countless hours sketching designs, sourcing unique materials, and perfecting our techniques for creating truly one-of-a-kind timepieces. Our first custom order came from Mr. Jenkins, the elderly gentleman whose father watch Natty had handled so carefully. He wanted to create a special timepiece for his grandson's college graduation. We worked closely with him to incorporate elements of his family's history. A tiny piece of wood from the family's old farmhouse, hands crafted to resemble the wheat that had been their livelihood for generations, and an engraving of the family motto inside the case. When Mr. Jenkins saw the finished product, tears welled up in his eyes.
"It's perfect,"
he whispered, cradling the watch like it was made of spun glass.
"You've captured our whole family story in this little thing. My grandson will treasure this forever."
As word spread about our custom creations, more orders began to trickle in. A young couple wanted matching watches to commemorate their wedding, with the coordinates of where they first met engraved on the back. A retired firefighter requested a watch that incorporated a piece of his old helmet, honoring his years of service. Each project presented its own unique challenges, but Natty and I tackled them with enthusiasm. Her creativity and my technical skills complemented each other perfectly, allowing us to bring even the most ambitious designs to life. One evening, as we were putting the finishing touches on our particularly intricate piece, I glanced over at Natty. She was bent over the workbench, her brow forward in concentration as she carefully set a tiny gemstone into place. The warm glow of the desk lamp caught the highlights in her hair, and I was struck by how much she changed in the months since she started working here. Gone was the timid, worn-down girl I first met. In her place was a confident young woman, her eyes bright with purpose and her movements sure and steady. She'd blossomed under the challenges of our new venture, revealing depths of talent and determination that never ceased to amaze me. "You know," I said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Natty looked up, surprise flickering across her face. "What do you mean?" I gestured around the workshop, at the half-finished watches and design sketches that covered every available surface. "All of this, the custom watches, the new direction for the shop, it was your idea, your vision. You breathed new life into this place, Natty. Into me, if I'm being honest." A blush crept across her cheeks, but she held my gaze. "I just saw the potential that was already here," she said softly. "You're the one who took a chance on me, who taught me everything I know. We did this together, Tom." There was something in the way she said my name, something that made my heart skip a beat. I suddenly became acutely aware of how close we were standing, of the way the lamplight softened the curves of her face. For a moment, the air between us seemed charged with possibility. Then, the spell was broken by the chiming of the clock on the wall, reminding us of the late hour. Natty cleared her throat and stepped back, turning her attention back to the watch on the workbench. "We should probably call it a night," I said, my voice sounding strangely rough to my own ears. "It's getting late." Natty nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. "Yeah, you're right. I'll just finish up this setting and then head out." As I watched her gather her things and leave, I felt a confusing mix of emotions swirling in my chest. Pride in how far she'd come, gratitude for the way she revitalized the business, and something else. Something warmer and more complicated that I wasn't quite ready to examine too closely. Shaking my hair to clear it, I turned back to my own workbench. There was still so much to do, so many ideas to bring to life. Whatever these feelings were, they would have to wait. We had watches to make. Chapter 5: Ticking Hearts. As our custom watch business continued to grow, so did the bond between Natty and me. We fell into an easy rhythm, spending long hours working side by side in the shop. Our conversations flowed seamlessly, from watch designs to personal stories, punctuated by shared laughter and comfortable silences. I learned more about Natty's life, how she stepped up to help care for her younger siblings after her father left, the struggles her mother faced trying to keep the family afloat on a waitress's salary. In turn, I opened up about my own fears and insecurities, the pressure I'd felt trying to keep the family business alive in a changing world. One particularly warm Saturday afternoon, we decided to take our lunch break in the small park across the street from the shop. As we sat on a bench, enjoying sandwiches from the deli down the block, Natty turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Can I ask you something, Tom?" she said, brushing a stray crumb from her lap. "Of course," I replied, curious about her serious tone. "What's on your mind?" Natty hesitated for a moment, then plunged ahead. "Why did you really hire me? I mean, I know you said it was because of my interest in watches, but there had to be more qualified people out there. People with actual experience." I leaned back, considering her question. "Honestly, it was your perspective. The way you talked about watches that first day in the car, seeing them as a symbol of possibility, of change. It reminded me of how I used to feel about the craft, before I got bogged down in the day-to-day struggles of running a business." I turned to face her fully, wanting her to understand. "You have this spark, Natty. This ability to see the beauty and potential in things that others might overlook. I guess I hoped some of that spark would rub off on me, on the shop. And it has, in ways I never could have imagined." Natty's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and something softer, more vulnerable flickering across her face. Wow. I don't know what to say. I just always thought..." "What?" I prompted gently. She shrugged, suddenly looking very young. "I guess I always figured you hired me out of pity. The poor kid from the wrong side of town, you know? I was afraid that one day you'd realize I wasn't worth the trouble and..." "Hey," I said firmly, reaching out to place my hand over hers. "Listen to me. You are not trouble, Natty. You're one of the most hardworking, talented, compassionate people I've ever met. This shop, this business we're building together, it wouldn't exist without you. Never doubt your worth, okay?" Natty nodded, blinking rapidly as if fighting back tears. Then, to my surprise, She leaned forward and wrapped her arms around me in a tight hug. "Thank you," she whispered against my shoulder, "for everything." I returned the embrace, acutely aware of the warmth of her body against mine, the faint scent of her shampoo. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine what it would be like to hold her like this every day, to wake up next to her, build a life together. The thought sent a jolt of panic through me. What was I doing? Natty was barely out of high school, and I wasn't exactly old, but I was certainly too old to be having these kinds of thoughts about her. She trusted me, looked up to me as a mentor. I couldn't betray that trust, couldn't risk ruining the partnership we built. Gently, I disentangled myself from the hug, putting a respectable distance between us on the bench. "We should probably head back," I said, my voice sounding strained even into my own ears. That Hartley commission isn't going to finish itself. If Natty noticed my sudden awkwardness, she didn't comment on it. We walked back to the shop in silence, but it wasn't the comfortable quiet we usually shared. There was a new tension in the air, an awareness that something had shifted between us. As we settled back into our work, I tried to focus on the intricate gears of the watch in front of me, but my mind kept wandering, replaying the feeling of Natty in my arms, the look in her eyes when I told her how much she meant to the business, to me. I knew I needed to get these feelings under control. Natty deserved better than to be the object of some midlife crisis infatuation. She had her whole life ahead of her, full of possibilities that didn't include being tied down to a struggling watchmaker nearly twice her age. But, even as I told myself all the reasons why this could never work, a treacherous part of my heart whispered that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something more. That the connection we shared went beyond mentor and protege, beyond even friendship. As the days went on, I found myself hyper-aware of every interaction with Natty. The brush of her hand as she passed me a tool, the way her eyes lit up when she saw the particularly tricky design problem, the sound of her laughter echoing through the shop. It all seemed magnified, charged with new meaning. I tried to maintain a professional distance, focused on our work and nothing else, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore the way my heart raced when she smiled at me, or the surge of protectiveness I felt when she talked about her struggles at home. One evening, as we were closing up shop, Natty paused in the doorway. "Hey Tom," she said, her voice hesitant. "Can I talk to you about something?" My pulse quickened. "Of course. What's up?" Natty took a deep breath, as if steeling herself. "I've been thinking a lot lately about the future, about what I want to do with my life." I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral, even as my mind raced with possibilities. Was she going to leave? Had she found a better opportunity elsewhere? "I've decided," she continued, "that I want to pursue watchmaking as a career. Not just working here, but really diving deep into the craft. I want to study horology, maybe even get certified as a master watchmaker someday." Relief and pride washed over me in equal measure. "Natty, that's wonderful. I think you'd be amazing at it. You already have such a natural talent." She held up a hand, cutting me off. "There's more. I was hoping you might be willing to take me on as a formal apprentice, to really teach me everything you know about the trade." My heart swelled at the thought of passing on my knowledge to Natty, watching her grow into a true master of the craft. But a small voice in the back of my mind whispered a warning. Taking her on as an apprentice would mean spending even more time together, working even more closely. Could I trust myself to keep things professional? To be the mentor she deserved? But looking at the hope shining in Natty's eyes, I knew I couldn't say no. Whatever my confused feelings might be, I owed it to her, and to the craft I loved, to nurture her talent. "I'd be honored," I said finally, my voice thick with emotion. "Nothing would make me prouder than to help you achieve that dream." Natty's face lit up with joy, and before I could react, she threw her arms around me in an exuberant hug. "Thank you, thank you, thank you," she exclaimed. "You won't regret this, I promise. I'll work harder than anyone ever has." As I returned the hug, savoring the warmth of her embrace even as I tried to maintain some semblance of propriety, I couldn't help but wonder what I was getting myself into. The road ahead was fraught with potential complications. But one thing was certain. Life at Anderson & Son Timepieces was about to get a whole lot more interesting. Chapter 6. Hands of Time. The months that followed Natty's decision to pursue watchmaking as a career were some of the most challenging and rewarding of my life. True to her word, She threw herself into her apprenticeship with a passion and dedication that never ceased to amaze me. We spent long hours hunched over workbenches, my hands guiding hers as she learned the intricacies of each tiny component. I taught her everything I knew, how to disassemble and reassemble complex movements, the art of hand finishing delicate parts, the subtle nuances of design that could make or break a timepiece. Nettie absorbed it all with an eagerness that rekindled my own love for the craft. But as her skills grew, so did the tension between us. There were moments when our hands would brush as we worked side by side, sending a jolt of electricity through my body. Times when I'd look up to find her watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch my throat. The air in the workshop seemed charged with unspoken possibilities, a ticking time bomb of emotion just waiting to explode. I did my best to keep things professional, focus on being the mentor she needed. But it was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore the way my heart raced when she smiled at me, or the surge of pride I felt every time she mastered a new technique. One particularly sweltering summer afternoon, we were working on a complex turbine movement, one of the most challenging complications in watchmaking. Natty had been struggling with particularly delicate adjustment, her brow forward in concentration as she manipulated the tiny gears. "Here, let me show you," I said, moving to stand behind her. I reached around, my hands covering hers as I guided her through the motion. "It's all in the wrist. You need to apply just the right amount of pressure." As I spoke, I became acutely aware of how close we were standing. I could feel the warmth of her body against my chest, smell the faint floral scent of her shampoo. Natty tensed slightly, then relaxed into my guidance. "Like this?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Exactly," I murmured, my mouth close to her ear. "You've got this." For a moment, we stayed frozen in that position, neither of us daring to move. The ticking of the clocks around us seemed to grow louder, marking each second of charged silence. Then slowly, Natty turned her head to look at me. Our faces were inches apart, her eyes wide and questioning. I could see the pulse fluttering in her neck, matching the rapid beat of my own heart. "Tom," she breathed, and in that single syllable, I heard a world of longing and uncertainty. It would have been so easy to close the distance between us, to give in to the desire that had been building for months. The rational part of my brain screamed a warning. She was my apprentice, my employee. I was supposed to be her mentor, not... I stepped back abruptly, breaking the spell. "Good job," I said, my voice sounding strained and unnatural. "I think you've got the hang of it now. Why don't you take a break? It's pretty hot in here." Natty blinked, a flash of hurt and confusion crossing her face before she schooled her features to a neutral expression. "Yeah, okay. I could use some air." As she left the workshop, I slumped into my chair, running a hand through my hair in frustration. What was I doing? I was supposed to be guiding her career, not entertaining fantasies about a relationship that can never work. But even as I berated myself, I couldn't shake the memory of how right it felt to hold her, how perfectly we fit together. For the first time, I allowed myself to truly contemplate what a future with Natty might look like. I imagined waking up next to her each morning, her sleepy smile the first thing I'd see. Working side by side in the shop, building our business and our life together, starting a family, watching our children grow up surrounded by the gentle ticking of clocks and the love of two people who had found each other against all odds. The vision was so vivid, so achingly beautiful, that it made my chest ache with longing. But it was just a fantasy. Natty was young, brilliant, with her whole life ahead of her. She deserved someone her own age, someone who could offer her a future unburdened by the bag of her struggling business and a man well into middle age. When Natty returned from her break, there was a new guardedness in her demeanor. She kept her distance, focusing intently on her work and speaking only when necessary. The easy camaraderie we shared for months seemed to have evaporated, replaced by an awkward tension that filled the workshop. Days passed, and though we continued to work together, something had undeniably shifted between us. Our conversations became stilted, limited to discussions of watch mechanisms and customer orders. I missed the warmth of our friendship, the way Natty's laughter used to fill the shop. But I told myself it was for the best. This distance would help us refocus our professional relationship and put an end to any inappropriate feelings. About a week after the incident, I was alone in the shop one evening, poring over the books. Despite the success of our custom watch line, the financial realities of running a small business in a competitive market were catching up with us. I was so engrossed in trying to make the numbers work that I didn't hear the bell over the door chime. "Tom?" Natty's voice startled me out of my concentration. What are you still doing here? It's past midnight. I looked up, blinking in surprise. Natty stood in the doorway, a concerned frown on her face. She was wearing a simple sundress instead of her usual work clothes, her hair loose around her shoulders. The sight of her made my heart ache. I could ask you the same thing, I said, trying to keep my tone light. Shouldn't you be out enjoying your Saturday night? Natty shrugged, stepping further into the shop. I was out with some friends, but I saw the light on as I was passing by. Is everything okay? I sighed, gesturing at the pile of paper spread across the counter. Just trying to figure out how to keep this place afloat. The custom watches are doing well, but our overhead is killing us. I might have to consider selling the building. Maybe moving to a smaller location. What? Natty's eyes widened in alarm. But this place is your family's legacy. There has to be another way. I shook my head, feeling the weight of years of struggle pressing down on me. I've tried everything, Natty. I've cut costs wherever I can, worked longer hours, even taken out a second mortgage on my house. But it's not enough. Maybe it's time to face facts. The world doesn't need old-fashioned watchmakers anymore. That's not true! Natty's vehemence surprised me. She strode forward, planting her hands on the counter and leaning towards me. What we do here matters, Tom. We're not just selling watches. We're preserving an art form, creating heirlooms that will be passed down for generations. Can't give up now. Her passion stirred something in me, a flicker of hope and determination I felt when we first started our custom watch line. I don't want to give up, I admitted, but I don't see any other options. Natty was quiet for a moment, her brow forward in thought. Then her face lit up with a spark of inspiration I'd come to know so well. What if we expanded our online presence? We could do virtual consultations for custom designs. Maybe even offer watchmaking classes online. And we could reach out to some of those watch collector forums. Show them what we can do. As she spoke, ideas began to flow between us like they used to. We spent the next few hours brainstorming, sketching out plans for a new website, discussing ways to streamline our production process. It felt like old times. The awkwardness of the past week forgotten in the excitement of charting a new course for the business. It wasn't until I glanced at the clock and saw it was nearly 3 a.m. that I realized how long we've been talking. Oh wow, I didn't mean to keep you so late, I said, suddenly feeling guilty. You should get home, get some rest. Natty waved off my concern. Don't worry about it. This was important. She paused, then added softly. I miss this, you know? Working with you like this, bouncing ideas off of each other. It feels right. Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. I knew I should say something to maintain the professional boundary I've been trying so hard to enforce. But looking at Natty in that moment, her eyes bright with enthusiasm, a smudge of ink on her cheek from our frantic note-taking, all my carefully constructed defenses crumbled. I've missed it too, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I've missed you, Natty. These past few days, with things being so awkward between us, it's been harder than I want to admit. Natty took a step closer, her expression a mix of hope and uncertainty. Then why did you pull away? After that day in the workshop, I thought maybe you felt something too. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she must be able to hear it. I did. I do. But Natty, you're so young. I'm your boss, your mentor. It wouldn't be right. I'm not a child, Tom, she said, a note of frustration creeping into her voice. I know my own mind, my own heart, and I know what I feel for you is real. Age is just a number. What matters is how we feel, how we fit together. She reached out, taking my hand in hers. The simple touch sent a jolt of electricity through my body. When I'm with you, Natty continued, her voice soft but steady, everything makes sense. You challenge me, inspire me, make me want to be better. Isn't that what love is supposed to be? Love. The word hung in the air between us, charged with possibility. I looked down at our joined hands, then back up at Natty's face. In her eyes, I saw a reflection of everything I've been feeling. The longing, the fear, the hope. It won't be easy, I warned her, even as I felt my resolve weakening. People will talk. They might not understand. And the business. Natty squeezed my hand. We'll figure it out together. That's what we do, isn't it? Face challenges, solve problems. This is just another puzzle for us to work out. I couldn't help but smile at her determination. It was one of the things I loved most about her. Her unwavering optimism. Her belief that any problem could be solved with enough effort and creativity. Love. There was no denying it now. Somewhere along the way, between broken watches and late-night brainstorming sessions, I had fallen, completely, irrevocably, in love with Natalie Carter. Okay, I said finally, my voice rough with emotion. Okay, let's give this a shot. But we take it slow, alright? Figure things out as we go. The smile that broke across Natty's face was like the sun coming out from behind the clouds. She threw her arms around me, and this time, I didn't hesitate to return the embrace. As I held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Chapter 7. A New Time. The weeks and months that followed were a whirlwind of change, both personal and professional. Natty and I navigated the delicate balance of our new relationship, taking things slow as promised, but reveling in the joy of finally being honest about our feelings. We decided to keep things quiet at first, not out of shame, but out of desire to protect the fragile beginnings of our romance from outside scrutiny. During work hours, we maintained a professional demeanor, but stolen glances and secret smiles told the story of our growing connection. As for the business, Natty's idea for expanding our online presence proved to be a game changer. We launched a sleek new website showcasing our custom designs, complete with a virtual consultation feature that allowed clients from around the world to work with us on creating their perfect timepiece. The online watchmaking classes were an unexpected hit. There was a whole community of hobbyists and aspiring watchmakers out there hungry for knowledge, and our courses quickly gained a reputation for being comprehensive and engaging. Natty's natural teaching ability shone through even in video format, and we soon had a waiting list for each new class we offered. Our reach expanded beyond anything I could have imagined. We received orders from collectors in Japan, Switzerland, and even a Saudi prince who commissioned a series of watches for his entire family. The Anderson & Son name, which had only been known only to a few loyal customers in Chicago, was now recognized in horological circles around the globe. But success brought its own set of challenges. As demand for our watches grew, we struggled to keep up with orders while maintaining the level of quality and personal attention that had become our hallmark. We needed help, but finding someone we could trust for our unique approach to watchmaking proved difficult. It was Natty who came up with the solution. "What about my brother Jake?" she suggested one evening as we were closing up shop. "He's always been good with his hands, and he's looking for a direction now that he's finished high school. We could train him like you trained me." The idea had merit. I had met Jake a few times and been impressed by his quick mind and easygoing nature. Plus, keeping things in the family felt right. Continuation of the legacy my grandfather had started all those years ago. So, Jake joined our little team, starting as an apprentice much as Natty had. It was a joy to watch his siblings work together, their natural rapport and shared passion for the craft bringing a new energy to the workshop. And having an extra pair of hands allowed Natty and me to focus more on design and client relations, areas where we truly excelled as a team. As our business flourished, so did our relationship. We took things day by day, learning to navigate the complexities of being partners in both work and life. There were challenges, of course. The occasional disagreement over a design choice would spill over into our personal time, or the stress of a particularly demanding client would leave us both on edge. But for every difficult moment, there were 100 small joys. The quiet intimacy of sharing a morning coffee before opening the shop, thrill of solving a particularly tricky mechanical problem together, the simple pleasure of falling asleep each night knowing that we wake up to another day of doing what we loved, side by side. We were cautious about going public with our relationship, aware of the potential for gossip or judgment given our age difference and professional connection. But as time passed and our bond deepened, it became harder to hide the depth of our feelings. It was at the Chicago Watch and Clock Collectors Association annual gala that we finally decided to step out as a couple. The event was a big deal in our little world, attracting enthusiasts and industry professionals from across the Midwest. Anderson & Son had been invited to showcase some of our custom pieces, a testament to how far we'd come. As we stood together greeting guests and discussing our latest designs, I found myself marveling at how natural it felt to have Natty by my side. She was radiant in a vintage-inspired dress that echoed the elegant lines of our watches, her eyes sparkling as she explained the intricacies of a particularly complex movement to an interested collector. Watching her, I was struck by a sudden overwhelming wave of love and gratitude. This brilliant, passionate woman had not only saved my business, It had brought light and purpose back into my life. How had I gotten so lucky? While thinking, I reached down and took her hand, intertwining our fingers. Natty looked up at me, surprise flickering across her face before melting into a warm smile. She squeezed my hand gently, a silent acknowledgement of the step we were taking. There were a few raised eyebrows and whispered comments as the evening wore on, but for the most part, our colleagues seemed to accept our relationship with little fuss. Many even commented on how well we worked together, how our designs seemed to reflect a perfect balance of tradition and innovation, much like our partnership itself. As we slow danced later that night, swaying gently to the music of a jazz quartet, I pulled Natty close and whispered in her ear, "Thank you." She leaned back slightly to look at me, a quizzical smile on her face. "For what?" "For everything," I said simply. "For believing in me, in us. For showing me that it's never too late to start over, to find love and purpose. You've given me a new lease on life, Natty. A new time." Tears shimmered in her eyes as she reached up and cupped my face in her hands. "We gave that to each other, Tom, and we're just getting started." As I leaned in to kiss her, heedless of the crowded ballroom around us, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. Whatever the future held, whatever challenges we might face, I knew that together, Natty and I could weather any storm. We had found in each other not just love, but a true partnership, in work, in life, in everything that mattered. The gentle ticking of the watches we wore, synchronized to the beat as one, seemed to whisper a promise of all the moments we would share, all the memories we would create. It was the sound of our love, as timeless and enduring as the craftsmanship we poured into every timepiece we made. As we danced under the glittering lights, lost in our own world, I knew that this love, this partnership, this shared passion, was the greatest masterpiece we would ever create. A love story written in gears and springs, ticking steadily onward into a future full of possibility. Epilogue: Timeless Love. 5 years have passed since that night at the gala, and life at Anderson and some timepieces has settled into a new rhythm. Our little shop has grown into a thriving business, respected worldwide for our unique designs and uncompromising quality. We've expanded into a larger space, but we've kept our original storefront as a workshop and museum, a testament to the legacy that brought us to where we are today. Jake has blossomed into a skilled watchmaker in his own right, bringing a fresh perspective and youthful energy to our designs. He's taken over much of the day-to-day production, allowing Natty and me to focus on the creative aspects of the business and mentoring the next generation of watchmakers through our now renowned apprenticeship program. As for Natty and me, we tied the knot 2 years ago in an intimate ceremony surrounded by family, friends, and more than a few beloved timepieces. Our wedding bands are our own creation, of course, each containing a tiny, intricate movement that beats in perfect synchronization with the other. A constant reminder of the harmony we found together. Life isn't always perfect. We still have our disagreements, our moments of doubt and frustration. The challenges of running a business while nurturing a marriage can be daunting at times. But at the end of the day, as we lock up the shop and head home hand in hand, I'm filled with a sense of gratitude for the journey that brought us here. Natty has just announced that she's pregnant with our first child, and I find myself marveling once again at the twists and turns of fate. I think about that rainy day when a kind-hearted young woman returned a lost wallet, setting in motion a series of events that would change both of our lives forever. As I place my hand on Natty's growing belly, feeling the first fluttering movements of our child, I'm struck by the parallels between watchmaking and life itself. Both require patience, attention to detail, and a willingness to adapt when things don't go as planned. Both are made up of countless tiny pieces that must work in perfect harmony to create something beautiful and meaningful. And both, when treated with care and love, can last a lifetime. The sun is setting outside our workshop window, casting a warm glow over the antique clocks and modern marvels that line our shelves. Natty looks up from the delicate movement she's adjusting, her face softened by the golden light and the contentment of a life well lived. "What are you thinking about?" she asks, catching me staring. I smile, moving to stand behind her and wrapping my arms around her waist. "Just how lucky I am," I reply, resting my chin on her shoulder. "How grateful I am for every tick and tock that led us here." Natty leans back into my embrace, her hands coming to rest over mine. "Me too," she says softly. "Every second." As we stand there, surrounded by the gentle symphony of ticking clocks, I close my eyes and simply breathe in the moment. In a world that often seems to move too fast, that values the new over the time-worn, we have found our own measure of time, a rhythm that beats the tune of love, craftsmanship, and the joy of creating something that will outlast us both. It's not the life I ever imagined for myself, but it's more than I ever dared to dream. And as I hold Natty close, feeling the steady beat of her heart against my chest, I know that this is where I'm meant to be. This is our time, our story, written in the language of gears and springs, of love and dedication. Shop bell chimes softly, signaling the arrival of a customer. Natty and I exchange a smile before stepping apart, ready to greet whoever has come to share in our world of timekeeping treasures. As we move towards the front of the shop, hand in hand, I'm struck by the thought that makes me pause. I turn to Natty, my voice soft with wonder. You know, when my grandfather started this shop, he always said that a good watch doesn't just tell time, it tells a story. I never really understood what he meant until now. Natty's eyes sparkle with curiosity. Oh? And what story do you think we're telling? I gesture around us, at the shop that has been part of my family for generations. The modern touches that Natty has brought to the space, at the evidence of our shared passion and hard work. It's a story of tradition and innovation, of old meeting new. It's about taking chances, about finding value in things and people that others might overlook. I bring her hand to my lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. But mostly, it's a love story, one that proves that with the right person by your side, it's never too late to start over, to rediscover your passion, to fall in love. Natty's free hand comes to rest on her belly, a tender smile is spreading across her face. And it's a story that's still being written, she adds softly. I nod, feeling a surge of excitement for all the chapters yet to come. Every tick, every talk, another moment in our story. The customer, an elderly gentleman, clears his throat politely, reminding us of his presence. But as we turn to greet him, I could see in his eyes a warmth of recognition, not of us personally, but of the love and connection we share. It's a look I've grown accustomed to seeing from our clients, many of whom come to us not just for our craftsmanship, but from the same sense of romance and timelessness that our story seems to embody. As Natty engages the man in conversation, expertly gauging his needs and interest, I take a moment to really look at her. The girl I met all those years ago, with her worn clothes and guarded expression, has blossomed into a confident, radiant woman. Yet the essence of who she is, her kindness, her creativity, her unwavering determination, remains unchanged. I think about the journey that brought us here, the lost wallet, the chance encounters, the leap of faith we took in each other. Each moment a tick on the face of time, leading us inexorably towards this future we built together. Later that evening, after we closed up shop and settled in at home, I find Natty in our study poring over sketches for her new design. The soft lamplight casts a warmth glow over her features, highlighting the contentment in her expression. This, I realize, is the image I want to carry with me always. Natty, surrounded by the tools of our trade, creating beauty out of tiny, intricate pieces. I move to join her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. How's it coming along? She looks up at me, her eyes alight with that familiar spark of creativity. I think I'm onto something here. Want to take a look? As I lean in to examine her work, I'm struck once again by how seamlessly our lives have intertwined. Our passion for watchmaking, once my solitary pursuit, has become the foundation of our shared life. Every design we create, every timepiece we craft, carries within it the story of us. It's beautiful, I murmur, truly impressed by the elegance of her design, just like its creator. Natty rolls her eyes at the cheesy line, but I can see the pleased blush spreading across her cheeks. Flatterer, she accuses playfully, before her expression turns more serious. Do you ever wonder what would happen if I hadn't found your wallet that day? If our paths had never crossed? I consider her question carefully. I imagine I'd still be at the shop, going through the motions, watching the business slowly fade away. And you? I'd probably be stuck in some dead-end job, dreaming of a future I couldn't quite reach. Natty finishes for me. She shakes her head, a mix of wonder and gratitude in her voice. It's amazing how one small act of kindness can change everything. I nod, pulling her into a gentle embrace. A single moment, a tick of the clock, and our whole lives change course. We stand there for a while, holding each other, listening to the soft ticking of the numerous clocks that fill our home, each one a testament to our craft, our passion, our love story. As we prepare for bed that night, I watch Natty go through her nightly routine, the simple domesticity of the moment, her humming softly as she brushes her hair, the gentle swell of her pregnant belly visible through her nightgown. fills me with a profound sense of peace and rightness. This is our time, our story. A tale of lost and found, of second chances and new beginnings. A reminder that love, like a well-crafted timepiece, can stand the test of time if treated with care and respect. As we settle into bed, Natty curled against my side, her head resting on my chest. I silently think of whatever twist of fate brought her into my life. With each steady beat of her heart, with each tick of the clock on our bedside table, I'm reminded of the precious gift we've been given, the chance to write our own story, to create our own time. Good night, my love, I whisper, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Good night, she murmurs back, her voice already heavy with sleep. Love you. As I drift off, I'm filled with the anticipation for all the moments yet to come. The birth of our child, the continued growth of our business, the countless small joys and challenges that make up a life shared. Each one a tick on the grand clock face of our journey together. In the quiet of the night, surrounded by the gentle ticking of the timepieces that have shaped our lives, I know with absolute certainty that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. Here, with Natty, in this moment, and in all the moments to come. For in the end, that's what true love is. A force as reliable as the most precise movement, as enduring as the finest craftsmanship. A constant that remains steady even as the world changes around us. A shared journey measured not in hours and minutes, but in heartbeats, in shared dreams, in a future built together, one precious second at a time. And as I feel sleep beginning to claim me, my arms tightening instinctively around Natty, I smile, for I know that when I wake, it will be to another day filled with the ticking of clocks and the beating of hearts. The sweetest music I could ever imagined. In this moment, in this love, we are timeless. End of story.